For weeks, Mulholland Drive was wrapped in total silence, a chilling calm after a tragedy that tore straight through Hollywood's golden heart, leaving a Rob and Michelle Reiner-shaped hole no one knew how to fill. The world waited for that one familiar voice to speak, but it stayed hauntingly quiet, like a ghost lingering in the hills. News anchors kept spinning theories, insiders whispered behind studio doors, and colleagues poured out their condolences and polished statements that couldn't mask the heartbreak. Yet from the king of the canyon himself, the man with that unforgettable grin and a fire that burned on screen for over 50 years, there was still nothing. No press release, no sources say, not even a single offhand comment. Jack Nicholson doesn't move for the world's rhythm. He makes his own beat. So when he finally chose to speak, it happened exactly when and how he decided. No flashing bulbs, no red carpet glare, just a recorder sitting on a heavy oak table in his dim living room. The late sunlight stretched long and gold across the canyon, slicing through dust and memory. His house stood like a vault, filled with art, echoes, and the weight of a life spent in full view but lived on his own terms. He sits there, shades on, not hiding, just being Jack. His frame looks smaller now, his famous features sharper, lines etched deep by years and sorrow. He lifts his glass, the ice clicking softly. The silence thickens until it feels alive. This isn't some interview, it's a confession, raw and real. And when he finally speaks, his voice rolls out low and rough, like gravel on an old desert road.
And that was very good for him, you know what I mean? And everybody was envious, as I would be naturally at the time. But in reality now, obviously, I wouldn't trade it with him.
Each word he speaks lands heavy, deliberate, like every syllable's been sharpened before it leaves his mouth. You know the papers, the television. They talk about Rob, the director, the man who made Stand By Me, the man who made The Princess Bride. They talk about Meathead, he says, a faint, humorless grin flickering and fading just as quick. They get that part right. He pauses, eyes distant, both steady. I guess that's the record, the stuff they print in obituaries. But they don't know him. His tone drops lower. They don't know the silence in the room when Rob was deep in thought. They don't know the sound of his real laugh when it wasn't for a camera. That laugh was huge, rolling, like thunder breaking through the clouds. A laugh that made you forget the world for a second. Jack leans forward, the soft thud of glass against the table breaking the quiet like a drum beat. And they damn sure don't know what it was like to be his friend when his own walls started caving in on him. His words hang in the air, sharp and bare. That's the father, Liz and Liv. 4. The father who loved his son so much. He couldn't see the monster standing right in front of him. He exhales, voice trembling, just enough to betray the weight of it all. Maybe he saw it and loved him anyway. I don't know which is worse. His hand tightens slightly on the table's edge. This is the story of that love and that monster, as seen by the one man close enough to witness both, and who stayed silent until now. The Born between Jack Nicholson and Rob Reiner wasn't born in champagne-soaked parties or fake Hollywood smiles. It was built in truth, loyalty, and a friendship that outlasted a spotlight. Their bond wasn't born from casual friendship. It was forged under pressure, in the heat of one of the most legendary courtroom scenes ever shot. The movie, A Few Good Men, the year 1992. That's where everything between them was sealed, tested, and made real. People forget, Nicholson says, his gaze drifting somewhere far beyond the room. Rob was an actor first. His voice softens, memory flickering in his eyes. That's the key to the whole thing. He wasn't one of those directors barking orders like a traffic cop. No, Rob lived inside the scene with you. He understood what it felt like to stare down a blank page, heart racing, wondering if the next line would hit or fall flat. He knew the raw panic of putting your soul out there for the world to judge. Most directors, they're voyeurs, Jack says with a small shake of his head. But Rob? Rob was a participant. Then comes the memory of that electric moment, Colonel Jessett's explosive monologue, the kind of scene that burns itself into cinema history. The pressure was suffocating, the kind that makes or breaks careers. The script, written by a young and fearless Aaron Sorkin, was pure rhythm, a storm of words that could soar high or crash hard depending on every single breath. We did that scene again and again, Nicholson recalls, over and over, until it sang. He remembers the setup, the camera angles, the tension thick enough to slice. Tom Cruise was bouncing off the walls with all that fire, and I'm there in that chair, in that uniform, just simmering. Jack grins faintly. Rob let me simmer. He didn't smother it with direction. He'd walk over between takes, no big speeches, no overthinking. Just look me dead in the eye and say real quiet, he really thinks he's the hero. That one line lit the fuse, and the rest became movie history. Jack, never forget that. That was it, the line that stuck like a spark in the dark. Rob wasn't just directing lines, he was steering the soul of a man trapped inside a uniform and a crumbling code. Nicholson leans back as he recalls a moment he's never shared publicly. One of those quiet, electric memories that never leave you. After an especially brutal take, while the crew reset lights and cables, Reiner drifted over, not to Jack's mark, not to bark instructions, but to the corner of the set where Jack stood, cigarette in hand, lost in thought. He just stood there with me, Jack murmurs, eyes narrowing like he's back there again. Didn't say a word for a minute. Then Rob finally spoke, voice low and thoughtful. My old man Carl told me once that the funniest people are always the saddest. I think the scariest people are the most certain. The words hum between them like smoke. He was talking about Jessup, sure, but he was also talking about life, belief, and the thin line between conviction and blindness. In that instant, the movie faded away. It wasn't about cameras or lines anymore. It was two men digging into what it means to be human. That's when Jack realized this wasn't just another Hollywood gig for Rob. He was chasing truth through the lens, trying to understand people, pain, and purpose. Their friendship locked in from that day, total opposites on paper, yet connected at the core. Reiner, the open, warm-hearted son of comedy royalty, a Hollywood liberal with a storyteller's grin. Nicholson, the guarded storm from New Jersey, cool, complex, unpredictable. But together, they found real ground. We'd grab lunch, not at Musso and Frank's. Too many eyes, Jack says with a small grin. We liked quiet spots. Sometimes we'd just talk on the phone. Lakers games, politics, getting older, and our kids. That was the big one. That was his heart, right there. His family. Nicholson's face tightens, the warmth of old studio lights fading into the dim, tangled glow of memory, of family, of heartbreak. He was so damn proud of Jake and Romy, Jack says softly, his tone slipping somewhere between pride and ache. He loved their spark, their independence. He'd talk about them and get this shine in his eyes. A father's light, pure and bright. For a moment, Jack's expression softens, but then it shifts. But when he talked about Nick, he continues. That light changed. It wasn't less love, never that. If anything, it was more. But it carried a different weight, a love that sat heavy on the heart, full of fear and hope tangled together. It was worried love, Jack murmurs, the kind that keeps you awake at night. He pauses, the silence stretching as if he's testing every word before letting it go. I've been in this town a long time, he says, voice roughened by truth. I've seen it all. The kids of famous people. Some soar, some crash hard. Hollywood, he says, is a beautiful trap. It's a toxic playground if you don't watch your step. The money, the access, the people who say yes to everything. It's poison if it gets in your blood. Rob knew that. He wasn't naive, not for a second. He and Michelle tried to build something real, Jack adds, nodding slowly. Family dinners, vacations, keeping their kids grounded. They were there. They were good parents. Damn good. But even the strongest walls can crack. Sometimes, he says quietly, the poison gets in it. It sneaks through the smallest gaps. Quiet, invisible, unstoppable. Jack's eyes dim as the memory turns darker. The day the news broke, I was home. Phone rings. Sharp, cutting through the quiet. Not a publicist, not an agent. It was a friend, voice shaking, barely a whisper. He stares at the table as if the sound still echoes. You don't process it, he finally mutters, voice falling to almost nothing. You just go still. The words came through the phone like static, broken, unreal. Rob and Michelle, found in the house. For a moment, Jack's mind refused to make sense of it. The words just crashed against his ears, meaningless sounds he couldn't string together because the picture they painted was too impossible to exist. It was like hearing that gravity had stopped working, a violation of the natural order itself. He doesn't describe it as grief, not at first. It wasn't a wave, he says quietly. It was a void, the kind of emptiness that swallows everything whole. The air in his house felt like it vanished, sucked clean from the room. Jack hung up the phone, walked straight out to his deck, and stared over the endless sprawl of Los Angeles. The city humming, glowing, completely unaware. "You stand there," he murmurs, "and the world just keeps moving." Down below, cars flowed down the freeway like nothing happened. A helicopter buzzed overhead. The sunlight hit the hills like any other day. And you think, how? Jack's voice cracks with disbelief. How can everything still go on when the world just ended? It's a cruel truth, it says. The ultimate insult. The world doesn't stop for your pain. It doesn't even slow down. He didn't touch the TV, didn't check the news online. He already knew what would be waiting. Headlines flashing, speculation swirling, faceless voices tearing through the tragedy like vultures, old photos, fake stories, noise. So, he did the only thing he could. He shut it all out. He sat in silence, the same silence that once echoed with Rob's laughter. "I kept thinking about Michelle," Jack says, his voice trembling now. "She was the calm in the storm, always. Rob, he was the big loud heartbeat of that family. But Michelle," he exhales deeply, eyes wet. "Michelle was the soul. She was grace and steel," Jack says softly, the words hanging like a prayer. The quiet strength that held it all together. His face tightens, and for a moment, he can't look up. Thinking about what they must have gone through in those final moments, that's the thought that keeps you up at night. It's a darkness you can't stare at straight on. His voice breaks slightly, but he pushes through it. In the days that followed, as the horrific details hit the airways and Aaron Sorkin poured his heart out in an emotional interview, Nicholson disappeared from public view. No statements, no appearances, no quotes. He wasn't processing it as an icon or a headline. He was just a man grieving his friend and grappling with a memory that wouldn't let him rest. It was a memory he buried for years. "A warning sign," he admits, his tone dropping low. "One I saw and ignored." He leans back, eyes distant, like he's watching it replay in front of him. "It was a few years ago, Rob's birthday. They had this party at their place in Brentwood. Warm night, perfect weather. The kind where the air feels soft. Friends everywhere. Actors, writers, old buddies. Carl was there, sharp as ever, cracking jokes, running the room like it was a stage. Everything felt light, golden, full of laughter. Until Jack saw him. Nick walked in," he says, pausing. "And right away I saw it. That look." He rubs his chin, remembering. "I've seen that look before. On set, in bars, and once or twice in my own mirror." His tone turns heavy. It's that restless rage, fire behind the eyes that's hunting for something, anything, to burn. Nick didn't seem drunk, not high, not in any way you could point to. It was deeper than that. It was like his soul was out of balance, Jack says quietly. Like something inside him was screaming, and he didn't know how to quiet it. Later that night, Jack slipped inside for a drink, the noise of the party fading behind him. But the unease, he says, never really left. The main party was alive out back. Music, laughter, the hum of a perfect night. But inside, the air felt heavier. As Jack stepped through the hallway, he caught the sharp edge of raised voices cutting through the quiet from a den just off to the side. He froze mid-step, not wanting to intrude, but the tone was unmistakable, tight, heated, dangerous. It was Nick and Rob. Nick had him cornered, not physically, not yet, but with that kind of energy that fills up all the air in the room. He loomed over his father, who sat in the chair, calm on the outside but tense beneath it. Nick's voice dripped with venom, every word soaked in bitterness. He was ranting about money, about his life, about everything he thought he'd been denied. Same old story, but that night, something about it felt darker, sharper, unhinged. Jack leans forward as he recounts it, his voice low. Michelle came in then, he says, face calm, perfectly composed, like she'd done this dance before. She crossed the room, put a hand gently on Nick's arm, and said his name, just his name, with this heartbreaking softness, like a mother trying to remind her child who he used to be. And Nick, he shook her off, not violently, but with this cold, cutting flick that made the air drop 10 degrees. It took my breath away, Jack admits. The look in his eyes, there was nothing there. No warmth, no love, no recognition. He pauses, shaking his head. It was like staring at a shark, something ancient and hungry, but empty inside. Rob finally noticed Jack in the doorway. For a moment, their eyes lock, just 1 second, but it said everything. I saw it all, Jack says, his voice cracking. The shame, the fear, the exhaustion, and beneath all that, the endless, bottomless love of a father who still couldn't give up. Then, with a tiny, almost invisible shake of his head, Rob silently told him, "Don't step in." That single gesture carried the weight of decades, pride, pain, and the unspoken heartbreak of a parent who already knew he was losing his child. It meant, "Let it go, Jack. It's okay. This is just us. Our problem." His voice drops to a whisper, weighed down by guilt that hasn't faded with time. "So I did," he continues, swallowing hard. "I turned around, walked back into the garden, smiled, nodded to a few people, and pretended I hadn't seen a thing." He pauses, the silence stretching. "That moment, it's the single biggest regret of my life." Jack draws in a shaky breath, the kind that sounds like it hurts on the way out. His sunglasses come off, and suddenly his eyes, red, wet, rimmed with exhaustion, say everything words can't. "I respected his privacy," he murmurs. "I respected his hope. But what I should have done," he trails off, searching for air. "I should have grabbed him by the shoulders and said, 'Rob, hope is not a strategy. Love is not a shield.'" His tone rises, edged with self-blame. There was a darkness in that boy, something deep, something broken, and Rob couldn't see it. Or maybe he just couldn't admit it. Jack's voice cracks. "But I didn't say it, because who am I, right? Who am I to tell another man how to raise his kid? Who am I to tell a father that maybe it's time to stop believing?" He sits back, jaw tightening, the pain raw but controlled. "That's what kills me," he says quietly. "I didn't want to be disrespectful, didn't want to break his, but faith can blind you if too tight." He slips his sunglasses back on. An old reflex, the armor sliding back into place. Aaron Sorkin talked about seeing something like it too. Jack adds after a long pause, "I'm not surprised. I'm sure a dozen of us did over the years. We all caught glimpses of it, that spark of anger, that lost look, and we told ourselves stories to feel better." He shakes his head slowly. "We saw the smoke and convinced ourselves it wasn't fire. Told ourselves it was just a kid struggling, just a phase. He'll grow out of it," we said. He lets out a bitter laugh that dies almost instantly. "We did it out of love, out of respect, out of fear of facing the truth. But all we really did was feed his father's hope. And that hope, in the end, is what got him killed." The air in the room feels heavy again as the conversation shifts to the present day, to the aftermath that no one can escape. Nick Reiner, Jack says flatly, is sitting in county jail. 2 counts of first-degree murder. Trial set for January. Then he gives a small, humorless scoff, the word leaving his mouth like poison. "Justice," he mutters. "That word tastes like ash. What is justice here?" Jack asks quietly, the words landing with a kind of tired disbelief. "You locked a kid up for life? You put a needle in his arm? And then what? Does that bring Rob and Michelle back? Does it fix anything?" He shakes his head slowly, jaw tight. "No. All it does is balance a ledger that never should have existed. It's just accounting. Cold, mechanical, useless, against a crime that defies any kind of measure." His tone softens as he talks about the Reiners' surviving children, Romy and Jake, their strength, their heartbreak. There's something almost paternal in his voice, a tenderness that cuts through the grit. "I read their statement," he says. "The way they focused on love and memory, how they refused to speak ill of their brother." He exhales, eyes heavy with admiration. "That's Rob and Michelle right there. That's their legacy, grace in the middle of hell." He leans back, lost in thought. In the face of something so dark, so cruel, their first instinct wasn't vengeance, it was compassion. They're trying to protect what's left of their parents' memory, trying not to let one terrible act erase a lifetime of laughter and love. That's not weakness, that's strength. Most people can't even imagine. Jack pauses, staring out the wide window, the Los Angeles skyline bleeding into the haze of early evening. The city hums below, alive and indifferent. "Maybe," he says after a long silence, "that's the only kind of justice you ever really get. The good they put into the world, it survives. It keeps going." He gestures faintly, his voice turning soft. "It lives on in the kids who didn't break. It lives in the stories, the laughter, the films that'll make people feel something long after we're gone. It lives in every friend who remembers the man behind the camera, not the legend, but the human being." He falls silent then, eyes still fixed on the city, as if searching for Rob and Michelle somewhere in its endless glow. 2 souls whose light refuses to fade. The air in the room feels thick, heavy with everything that's been said, everything that still hangs between them and the ghosts that refuse to leave. The recorder keeps running, its tiny red light blinking. capturing not just words now but the quiet hum of the house, the faint echo of distant traffic, and the breath of a man who seems to have forgotten he's being recorded at all. At this moment, Jack Nicholson isn't a legend. He's just a man sitting alone in his living room, talking about a friend he'll never hear laugh again. "The last time I talked to him," Jack finally says, his voice soft, almost tender, "was about a month before it happened." He exhales slowly, like the memory still stings. "Just a phone call, nothing special. We talked about the Lakers, about some dumb new movie coming out. Normal stuff." He smiles faintly, and it flickers like an old film reel. Then he got quiet for a second. Just this pause. Jack's eyes cloud over, his voice lowering. He said, "You know, Jack, for all the craziness, we did all right, didn't we? We got to make movies. We got to tell stories." It was a soft, almost broken laugh. And I said, "Yeah, Rob, we did. It's a pretty good life." Then we hung up. He stands up slowly, moving toward the massive window that overlooks the city. His city. The fading sunlight hits his shoulders as he stares out over Los Angeles, that sprawling kingdom of dreams and ghosts. He doesn't move for a long time. From behind, he looks like a monument. One man standing against a city that gave him everything and took just as much back. When he finally speaks again, his voice drifts from across the room, muffled by glass but heavy with truth. "He always looked for the good in people," Jack says. "That's what made him who he was." He turns slightly, his reflection faint in the glass. "Rob made movies about the ones who never gave up. About friendship. About love that endures. About finding hope when the world's falling apart. He believed in the happy ending." Nicholson turns around fully now, his face carved in grief and resolve, his eyes glinting behind the tinted lenses. "He believed people were decent," he says, his tone steady but hollow. "That was his greatest gift as an artist, and his fatal flaw as a father." The words hang there, final, sharp, and unbearably human. He spent his life directing heroes and crafting villains for the big screen, but the cool twist is, he never realized the real villain wasn't out there in the world. It was closer, too close. The monster lived under his own roof, his son. That's the truth no one wants to face, because no one can handle it. The interview ends. Jack gives a short nod, the kind that says everything without a word. The door shuts softly behind you, and there he stands, Jack Nicholson, the legend of Hollywood, alone in his fortress, above the city, surrounded not by fame or trophies, but by the ghost of a friend he couldn't save. The silence from Mulholland Drive returns, no longer empty, but heavy, alive with the weight of a story finally spoken. If this story hits you, like, comment, share, and subscribe, because some truths deserve to be heard.